Members, recess is coming to a close. Bring us back to order here. Majority Leader Heath.
Thank you, Madam President. I move call of the Senate.
A call of the Senate has been moved and properly sustained. Will the sergeants please close the doors, allow no senators to leave, and return those who are absent from the chambers? Mr. Majors, would you please call the roll?
Aguilar. Balmer. Baumgartner. Brophy. Brophy. Cadman. Crowder. Grantham. Grantham. Harvey. Heath. Herpin. Hill. Hodge. John. Johnston. Jones. Jones. Cathalis. Kerr. King. Lambert. Lundberg. Marble. Newell. Nicholson. Renfro. Renfro. Rivera. Rivera. Roberts. Roberts. Scheffel. Schwartz. Stedman. Tocktrop. Todd. Ulibarri. Zenzinger. Brophy. Grantham. Renfro.
Who? His father?
Looking for Roberts.
Let's just go ahead without Roberts. Yeah. That's what roll call.
She'll be right now. Go ahead.
Majority Leader Heath.
Thanks. I move the call be raised, Madam President.
The motion is to raise the call. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the call is raised. Message from the House.
April 7, 2014, Madam President, the House has adopted a transmit herewith House Joint Resolution 1015.
Introduction and consideration of resolutions. Mr. Majors, would you please read the title to HJR 1015?
House Joint Resolution 1015 by Representatives Rosenthal and Gardner and Senators Crowder and Ulibarri concerning the declaration of April 28, 2014 through May 4, 2014 as Holocaust Awareness Week.
Senator Ulibarri.
Thank you, Madam President. We move House Joint Resolution 1015 and ask that it be read at length.
Mr. Majors, would you please read the resolution at length?
Whereas prejudice, bigotry, racism, and hate have been the cause of conflict, war, and mass atrocities throughout history. And whereas the Nazi regime was able to exploit severe economic hardships in the aftermath of World War I to foster prejudice and hatred toward a group that had historically been used as scapegoats throughout Europe, culminating in the attempt to exterminate the Jewish population in Europe, widely known as the Holocaust. And whereas during the Holocaust, at least 11 million people were brutally murdered, at least 6 million of whom were Jewish people, and whereas other marginalized groups such as Soviet prisoners of war, ethnic Poles, political and religious dissenters, intellectuals, homosexuals, children and adults with disabilities, and Roma were victims of the Holocaust. And whereas it is imperative that we and future generations never forget the tragic lessons learned from the organized government-sponsored mass killings of the Holocaust. And whereas the lessons of the Holocaust are becoming more difficult to teach as survivors continue to pass away and consequently first-hand accounts become more scarce. And whereas it is also important to remember, honor, and emulate those righteous people who risked their lives to save thousands of innocent people during the Holocaust, and to learn from their legacy of courage, selflessness, and hope. And whereas many courageous people have been honored with the designation of Righteous Among the Nations by Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Martyrs and Heroes Remembrance Authority, for acts of bravery in saving the lives of Jewish people during the Holocaust, reminding us today of our personal obligations to stand up against prejudice and discrimination. And whereas as a common standard of achievement for all people and nations, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1948 Declaration, adopted by the United Nations, asserts that recognition of the inherent dignity of the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. And whereas the Declaration notes that disregard and contempt for human rights have resulted in barbarous acts which have outraged the conscience of mankind, and the advent of a world in which human beings shall enjoy freedom of speech and belief and freedom from fear and want has been proclaimed as the highest aspiration of the common people. And whereas, pursuant to the Declaration, member states have pledged themselves to achieve, in cooperation with the United Nations, the promotion of universal respect for and observance of human rights and fundamental freedoms. And whereas over half a century after the conclusion of World War II, too many of the world's nations have not learned the lessons of the Holocaust, as demonstrated by recent episodes of ethnic cleansing, genocides, crimes against humanity, and mass killings in so many parts of the world, including Syria, Bosnia, Cambodia, Rwanda, and the Sudan. And whereas museums throughout the country and Israel, such as the Yad Vashem Museum in Jerusalem, the Museum of Tolerance currently under construction in Jerusalem, and the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C., and archives and collections such as the Mazzala Holocaust Collection, which was recently donated to the University of Colorado and is the world's largest privately owned archive, attest to the atrocities of the past and the need to educate future generations in order to prevent similar events in the years ahead. And whereas it is the responsibility of families, educators, and the many diverse religious communities around the world, as well as political leaders, humanitarians, public officials, and the media, to recognize the Holocaust as both a political and human tragedy, and to spread the knowledge to our younger and future generations. And whereas it is imperative that all concerned citizens raise awareness and take action regarding current and potential instances of genocide, organized mass killing, ethnic cleansing, and crimes against humanity. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the House of Representatives of the 69th General Assembly of the State of Colorado, the Senate concurring herein, that we, the members of the General Assembly, proclaim the week of April 28, 2014 through May 4, 2014 as Holocaust Awareness Week, and declare that the people of Colorado should use these days to teach and remember the great injustices of the past and to commit to preventing such political and moral atrocities in the future. Be it further resolved that copies of this joint resolution be sent to the Jewish Community Relations Council of Jewish Colorado, formerly known as the Allied Jewish Federation of Colorado, the Mountain States Regional Office of the Anti-Defamation League, the Colorado Coalition for Genocide Awareness and Action, the Colorado Agency for Jewish Education, the Holocaust Awareness Institute at the University of Denver Center for Judaic Studies, the Interfaith Alliance of Colorado, the Mizell Museum, and Babi Yar Park.
Senator Crowder.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move HJR 14-1015. There's a museum in Israel that depicts the Holocaust. In this museum is a very dark walkway that indicates dreariness. On this short walkway are thousands of twinkling stars that symbolize children lost in the Holocaust. Along with this is the sound of children's laughter, laughter that will never be heard on this earth. Along with this and many other documented instances, this should be a reminder of not only of the millions who died in this event, but also how this epic event of attempted decimation of people indeed is one of mankind's historic darkest hours. The consequences of the Holocaust resonate to this day. In a recent conversation with a person of Jewish descent in this building recently, indicated to me a very simple statement which had a profound impact on me. Most of us have active passports in which we utilize them for simple travel abroad. We think of far-off places in which to visit and explore. This individual indicated he had an active passport for himself and his family. In the event that if a repeat of history would once again raise its ugly head, he would somehow protect his family by escape. We must stand extremely vigilant against hate and prejudices. To do otherwise, history has a way of repeating itself. Thank you.
Senator Todd.
Thank you, Madam President, and it is my honor to share with you an essay that was written by a Colorado student, Adam Butterman, who is a student at Littleton High School. And as I was reading through his writing, I recalled the opportunity that I had to actually visit Israel with several of our fellow legislators back in 2005. And then the honor of being able to teach and work with young people when I was teaching at West Middle School and 7th graders. And one of the things that I would say in terms of a highlight of my teaching was always when we addressed Holocaust remembrance. We were able to see the soul of a child touched through their writing, through their art, and through their compassion. And so I thank Adam, who's with us here today, for allowing me to read and be his voice here on the Senate floor. A vast pile of ashes filled with human bones is an image that you can never get out of your head. Thousands, if not millions, of humans burned to nothing. Valuable lives. Future lawyers, doctors, and scientists all piled up into dust. Faces, real people with friends and families turned to nothing. Majdanek concentration camp in Lublin, Poland, although Majdanek was the last camp for us to visit, the horrific images I saw there had the most impact on me. Although our Israel study tour group had spoken about what Poland was like prior to leaving, nothing compares to seeing everything in person. The chills I had been warned about crept up on me the second our bus reached a halt at the Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp. As I write this, those same chills are coming back, reminding me of the images I saw. The first thing that I noticed when we got off the bus was not the buildings, the train tracks, or the gate that read, Arbeit macht frei, or work makes you free in English, but it was the green that surrounded the landscape. Trees, flowers, and a vibrant green grass captivated the camp. How could a place with so much beautiful nature be the home to a mass murdering? In my opinion, the landscape provided the prisoners hope that a better, greener life awaited them even when it seemed all was lost. As we walked through the camp, I witnessed many horrible images. I am a witness to what Hitler had done to my people. While you can learn about the Holocaust in textbooks, nothing compares to the empathy and sadness felt once going to the camps. With the sadness, though, comes a sense of pride. I am proud that my religion made it through the Holocaust. I am proud that Judaism is thriving today. I am proud that I can freely practice my religion without any fear of being persecuted. And because of my experience, I have never been more proud to be a Jew. This sense of pride followed my peers and I to Israel, the birthplace of our people. Although the mood was somber when we landed in Israel, we had never felt stronger before. Going to Israel showed us how strong Judaism had become. It showed us that despite the murder of millions of our people, we can still gain our own state and thrive. Going to Poland was a valuable experience that allowed me and my peers to not ever take Israel for granted. Thank you, Adam, for sharing this with us.
Senator Balmer.
Thank you, Madam President. Members, I want to share with you two memories that I have because I went to Auschwitz, and the visual image that's been seared into my brain forever. And I am glad that I can never forget touring that. I also have been to the Holocaust exhibit in Washington, D.C., and the things that I saw there stick with me. They don't go away. They stay inside your heart. They stay inside your brain. But I also want to share with you, and I've always appreciated the fact that this resolution has included Bosnia, because my experience in Bosnia was different. I didn't see it I saw it with my eyes, but I also smelled it with my nose. And that is one of the most horrifying things about this, is that we were one of the very first American units to go into Bosnia back in December of 1995. President Clinton had brokered the Dayton Peace Accords, and the Dayton Peace Accords created a zone of separation throughout the country of Bosnia, separating the three warring factions. And that peace accord enumerated that 20,000 American troops, 20,000 British troops, and then 20,000 from the other NATO countries would combine for 60,000 troops in Bosnia. And the purpose of those troops was to be in the ZOS, the zone of separation between the warring factions. We went there and we were given quick training on what we would be confronting, but we weren't prepared for what we were going to confront. The first day that we were there, we smelled these awful smells, and the closer you got to them, the stronger they were. I think every single member of our unit threw up when we got close to some of these mass graves, because the smell overwhelms your senses. The reason I want to tell you that story is because the bad thing that happened is that we got used to it. After about, 4 or 5 days, we no longer smelled the smell. And you could always tell when there was a new soldier that joined the unit, because he would be puking for the first couple of days. And he kept asking us, "Can't you smell that awful smell?" And I said, "Well, we did when we first got here." And so you think about the horrible things that the Nazis did, and then you say, how did all these people that were in these towns right next to these concentration camps, these death camps, how did they let it go on? And my guess is that they just got used to the smell, and they no longer smelled it after a while, which is a horrible thing. And that also speaks to the ability to look the other way when someone else is doing something that is incredibly wrong. And so we always have to make sure that we keep all of our senses sharp, that we never allow anybody to say that the Holocaust didn't happen, and that these past horrific sins will never be forgotten in all of our senses. And so I just wanted to share those two bad memories that I have that will never leave me.
Senator Kerr.
Thank you, Madam President. Wanted to talk just a little bit about, as the senator from Arapahoe County did, the aftermath of genocide, but also a little bit about before a genocide happens. Many of you know that, well, as the resolution was being read, the last two countries mentioned, Rwanda and Sudan, are perhaps two of the most memorable genocides in our lifetimes that I think remind us of the connections to the Holocaust for those of us who did not live through that time period. When I was growing up, when I was about 12, my family lived in Sudan, and my dad, being a hydrologist, his job was to help the villages in the Darfur region and other places in western Sudan access clean water. And the villages had wells, but getting the clean water out of the ground and being able to use that clean water, that was the job that my dad was hired to do. And it was through a loan from the World Bank that came in, gave money to the Sudanese government to do this. I, of course, didn't know all those details at the time. I was in sixth grade and living in Africa, so that's what I was wrapped up in. But we were supposed to live there for about 2 years. My dad's job was supposed to go on for about 2 years, but after less than a year, actually, the Sudanese government pulled the plug, said, nope, we don't want the money anymore. We're not interested in actually the people in Darfur and them having clean water, and so we moved home. So that was about 1980, and of course, even back then, some of the divisions between North and South and East and West and the Muslims and Christians in Sudan were already starting to bubble up. But I can't help but think that that was a decision that helped lead to what we all know became the first genocide of the 21st century, and as many people have said, hopefully the last genocide of the 21st century. I connect that into Rwanda, and those of you that read the paper today probably saw this story about Rwanda, learning to forgive, and I think that kind of leads to the next point after the genocide. And I very much appreciate that title, and I think that's important as we bring up and why every year. You know, sometimes I hear people say, why do we bring certain resolutions every year? Why do they come up every year? It's not just about learning to forgive, it's making sure that we don't forget. I want to read just a little bit about, from the article, the first couple of paragraphs. She lost her baby daughter and her right hand to a manic killing spree. He wielded the machete that took both. Yet today, despite coming from opposite sides of an unspeakable shared past, Alice Mukarurinda and Emmanuel Deisasaba are friends. She is the treasurer and he the vice president of a group that builds brick houses for genocide survivors. They live near each other and shop at the same market. Their story of ethnic violence, extreme guilt, and to some degree, reconciliation is the story of Rwanda today, 20 years after its Hutu majority killed more than 1 million Tutsis and moderate Hutus. I'll let you read the rest of the article. It's a very well-written, informative article. I want to go to the last paragraph, though. I've been asking myself why I acted like a fool, listening to such words, that this person is bad and that person is bad, Emmanuel said. The same people that encouraged the genocide are the ones saying there was no genocide.
Senator Kafalis.
Thank you, Madam President Pro Tem. I rise in support of this resolution, and I would just like to share a couple of thoughts. First of all, I've been in the legislature now for 8 years, and I'm always grateful when we take time to honor those who have come before us, when we remember about the tragedy of the Holocaust and more modern versions of genocide that have occurred. What I'm mindful of is each year the elders that have come before us, and it seems that their numbers lessen. And I know there are some folks that were here last year that perhaps are not here this year. And so I just want to make sure that we're always very mindful of the elders who have come before us, and they share their stories, and hopefully their oral history is passed on, and we capture that, because it is important to remember. A second thought I'd like to share is that I have traveled to the Yad Vashem Museum in Jerusalem. I've been to the United States Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., and then I had the privilege of traveling in Poland and in Germany and other places, and visited Auschwitz and Birkenau and some of those places. And if you've never been, it's to say the least, it's very humbling. But one of the things, the gates and the train tracks and the barracks, and folks would go to different sides. But one of the things that was really striking is that if you go to the back end near the forest there's the remnants of gas chambers. And as I understand the history, there was a very intentional effort on the part of the Nazis to destroy the evidence so that folks could perhaps alter history and not speak truth to power. So that would be something else that I'd like to share. And then finally, this whole notion that none of us are free until all of us are free. And I'm reminded of Martin Niemöller, who is a Lutheran pastor who resisted the Nazi regime. And I think we are all aware of one of the quotations that he is most famous for. And I think it reads something like, first they came for the socialists, and I was not a socialist, and therefore I did not speak out. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I was not a trade unionist, and therefore I did not speak out. And then they came for the Jews, and I was not a Jew, and therefore I did not speak out. And then they came for me, and no one was left to speak out. So I think that reminds us constantly of the importance of speaking truth to power. And I'm thankful that we take time to do this, and I thank the sponsors, and I thank all of you, and certainly our wonderful guests.
Senator Lundberg.
Thank you, Madam President. Conveniently numb. Do we not all far too often become conveniently numb? I commend the sponsors for bringing this resolution before us, and certainly urge an aye vote, even though I wouldn't have worded it exactly the way it's worded. I frankly would not rely upon the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights as the highest and best standard for determining the moral values. But the resolution states that we should declare that the people of Colorado should use these days to teach and remember the great injustices of the past, and to commit to preventing such political and moral atrocities in the future. We don't, year after year, bring this resolution in one form or another before us just to remember the past, but to deal with the present and to guard against what could be in the future. And I ask all of us, are we still too conveniently numb? I see human life taken that I believe is immoral and unjust. Am I too conveniently numb to speak out? I pray that we will all reevaluate our moral standards in each and every step we take.
Senator Grantham.
Thank you, Madam President. Each year, it's rather difficult to come up here and actually know what to say sometimes. When we have this every year, it's no less profound than it was the year before. The opportunity to go to Israel that some of us were afforded this last year, and myself and some of the other senators are still here. We went back in 2011. Certainly an experience that I will never forget, especially the opportunity to go to Yad Vashem and see that with your own eyes. It's almost indescribable. Maybe not to the extent Senator Balmer's experience with the assault on the senses that he described, but certainly the visual reminder of what happened during World War II and with the Holocaust. Some of those visual reminders of what happened as you're walking through Yad Vashem, and you find yourself upon a glass floor and you're looking down into a pile of shoes. You walk farther and you see suitcases full of eyeglasses. You see the remnants of things that belong to real people that suffer the most horrible end. It is something that will certainly be ingrained in my mind forever. I do have the opportunity actually to read a story this morning about someone that unfortunately he could not remain here this morning since it started over in the House. He had to leave this morning. He couldn't join us today, but regardless, I'd like to honor him through the telling of his story and his experience. His name is Jack Wellner. Jack Wellner was 19 when the Germans marched into Poland in September of 1939. In his hometown of Lodz, the SS turned the poorest part of that city into a ghetto, surrounded by barbed wire with a sentry box every 90 feet. Lodz became an industrial center for the manufacture of material for the German army, and anyone unable to work was immediately sent to an extermination camp. Starvation was rampant in the ghetto, and Jack used to pick grass for his mother to make soup with. In 1944, Jack and his mother were sent to Auschwitz, where his mother was immediately killed. His two sisters were sent to Bergen-Belsen, and after a week at Auschwitz, Jack was transported to Dachau. Jack was assigned to a work crew unloading heavy sections of rebar from boxcars. Already weak from a lack of food, he knew he wouldn't survive long in this job. Due to the generosity of a German foreman on his detail, Jack was able to become the foreman's assistant. And the foreman snuck him food and watched over him. Jack remained at Dachau until April of '45, when the SS assembled the remaining prisoners and sent them on a death march into the mountains. Those few guards who remained led them to a barn in a nearby town, then disappeared. The Americans liberated them later that day. Jack returned home to Lodz and found both of his sisters. The rest of his family, tragically though, passed away during the Holocaust. And to our good fortune, Jack eventually emigrated here to Denver. Today, Jack gives talks to area school children, even now in his mid-90s, talking about his experiences in the camps. Jack says, "I'll never forgive the Germans, and I'll never forget. But I tell the kids never to let hatred into their hearts. If you do, it will ruin your life. Don't let the past ruin your future."
Senator Newell.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise in support of the resolution today. Two, it's been said that in life, our process throughout life is only about remembering and forgetting, and that we're constantly remembering that we are, in my belief, connected to God, or forgetting that we're connected to other human beings, and then we're forgetting that we're loving other human beings, and then we're forgetting about loving human beings. And the senator from Arapahoe County speaking about his experience being so close to that and needing to forget in order for him to be able to survive that moment. That's so sad to me, that this kind of moment is meant for us to remember and for it to never happen again, so that we never forget that. But for me, more importantly, is the prevention, that moving forward in my life, in my life mission of working toward peace, personal peace, community peace, world peace, there is a remembering and forgetting as well. That remembering that we are communities, that we are individuals, and that are we experiencing that inner peace? Are we experiencing peace in the home? Are we experiencing peace in our communities, and accepting absolutely everyone, no matter what their history is, no matter what's in their red wagon, no matter what's in their baggage, no matter the color of their skin or sexual orientation or anything that is around them. We accept them as whole and perfect. And yet, are we doing that? Are we individually, every person in this room, doing that every day? And so to me, it is about the prevention, that remembering this past can help us prevent it from occurring again. If we are all accepting and peaceful human beings in our own worlds, so that we can make the whole world conscious of that. And so I say thank you to Adam for offering your words to us, because it is your generation who is going to carry on that remembrance. And remembering the peace can bring about peace. That peace begets peace. And I'm only here in faith and hope that you will do that, and hoping that we can do that in our own communities, those of us in this chamber. So thank you, both senators, for bringing this forward, and thank everyone in this room for remembering, not just today, but every day when you wake up. Thank you.
Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Madam President. And I have never had the good fortune of traveling to Israel. I've never traveled to any of the former concentration camps. I did have one incredible experience where I had the opportunity to go to Amsterdam about 4 years ago. And I didn't have a daughter then yet, but I ended up staying in a little attic that was probably only 3 blocks down from Anne Frank's old house. And so we got in an afternoon, had a couple of hours, and ended up walking down the street and spending the afternoon at Anne Frank's original home. And what was so amazing to me about it was that through reading her diary and knowing the history, you think of her as a very serious literary figure. And when you walk into the room, it looks like any other 8-year-old girl's room. There are pictures of movie stars, and there are strawberries, and there are all of the components of a colorful little life that you wouldn't expect. And so I left that not knowing how to tell my own kids this story, but feeling like we had an incredibly profound obligation to do so. And so I went back to my little attic a couple of blocks down and wrote my boys this postcard. I didn't have my daughter Ava yet. And Adam, your very, very moving words inspired me to just share this letter I wrote my boys. Dear Emmett and Seamus, I met a girl today who lived in an attic. A game of hide and seek, but not with friends. Behind a wall of books, she wrote her own. A book she never got to sell or touch. A first edition without a signature. Orphaned into 24 languages all at once. Unlike your books, so timeless, this one ages, marking days of an unlived life with relived pages. Her room is full of pictures, movie stars and flowers, little girls and wild strawberries, like those she'll never pick and never taste, life that she'll never conceive nor carry. My attic down the street is full of light, not just from the unblacked windows and space to write, but glowing from the lives we get to live, the late night books and morning hugs you give, the long hallway sprint launched into my arms, a reckless smile, and a, "Daddy, look what I got," a little yellow star stickered to his hand. It's not some playground prize that lights his face, but my little boy stumbling on a world of grace. The mystery that others love us too. Not because we're family or some debt we're due, but for a light that radiates within him. The reason strangers walking by can't help but tussle his hair or can't hide a raucous smile to show him he is what's best about us. Why sometimes for no reason they can't stop from telling him he is a little golden star. That, my sons, is the light inside my attic. And there, too, is the crime that I can't forgive. The picture of 2 daughters and their father, walking shamed with giant, hateful yellow stars, pinned to tell a child all that she is not. That strawberries and flowers are not for her. It's not that others see her as some evil. That lesson long since pierced her broken heart. It's that her dad must wear it too. Where she had sought a hand to tend a flickering flame, he, through his silent scars, snuffs out that light. But worse, eclipse the faith that was its source. Her gait shows you a child already gone, propped like a scarecrow whose parts can't find a fit. No matter what history will try to say, his face told me that Otto, her father, died that day. She could not leave. I knew I couldn't stay. 2 roads uncrossing here on Westergraft Way. I fumbled for a gift to give Otto, her dad, a custom when visiting a stranger's house. Normally we'd have had her to our house to play. I promised instead to introduce her to Emmett and Shay. That was not a promise I meant to keep, and one I've tried 3 times so far to break. Her room is filled with things I never wanted you to touch. Worse than scissors in the drawer or Clorox in the cupboards, these things aren't safe if just you walk real slow. Even if Daddy helps you pour, they can't be safe. They're not even safe for mommies or for daddies, for the touching or the seeing makes wounds that kisses can't fix and Band-Aids don't hide. What kind of father would I be to lay them out before you? Knowing once they've opened, they're never put away. Knowing they'll be with you on the playground, in your bed between your blankie and your tiger, and with you all the times that I am not. These most dangerous of things, what kind of father would I be, giving my boys a barbed wire ball and sending them out to play? I'd be running with Band-Aids and hugs, playgrounds and ice cream, forever binding my boys back up again. ice cream. Oh, Otto ice cream. Just one of my boy's ice cream cones. Just the blueberry ball leaning off the cone about to fall. Just that would have been enough to tide her over to the liberation. I wish my boys could give her every cone they've had. Maybe it's a foreign concept for a child, that kind of human trade, the kind that Schindler made. Maybe too precocious for a child of 3, that may be, if it were only an idea. But I know my little boys, the way they hoard, then suddenly share their toys. And I would build and defend 1,000 annexes for them, the way they would for each other, to ensure they never had to stand and watch the starving of a sister or a brother. And I know they would do the same for Anna, if they could only have the chance to meet her. They don't need to know history or hatred or reason, her color or her country, her God or her season. They need to hold her hand and push her swing, see her pictures, play with her toys. And then my boys can never be the uniforms knocking at the door. Never watch as someone else gets a star that hurts and not stop to wonder why. We don't learn lessons of never again. They're not given from books or lectures, from paper and pen. When we know them, it is because we feel them, the way we feel family or a friend, like Anna. That is why, my boys, I'm sending you this postcard from Amsterdam. Emmett and Seamus, meet Anna. Thank you.
Senator Heath?
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to make a few comments about the word denial. It was January 1965, and Josie and I and our firstborn of then only 2 months old arrived in Germany. Less than 20 years after the war. Josie and I had just finished completing training at the Army Language School in German, and I was to be a liaison officer with the German government. And it was interesting. Language school in Monterey was an incredible experience, educational experience. And I look back on it, we talked about a lot of things. We learned German traditions, obviously the language, the culture, but we never once talked about the Holocaust as part of that program. So when Jose and I arrived, we lived in a German apartment, immediately became friends with our neighbors, and my job was to become friends with the German prosecutors, the equivalent of the attorney generals of the Rhineland Falls area, the German states. And obviously, we accepted them for what they were. And as I look back, really never had a conversation about the Holocaust and what went on. Jose and I went to the Anne Frank house. We went to Dachau. We experienced all of the atrocities that had occurred. And when we tried to engage our German friends in that, the conversation really went nowhere. And after we returned, I had the good fortune of having a job in international that took me back to Germany. And I can remember it was only a couple of years after we had returned to the States. I was still in the Army at that time. And we read a book. And we discovered at a concentration camp, we lived in a little town, about 60,000 people called Bad Kreuznach, Germany. We discovered that there was a concentration camp right on the outside of that town. And we had never heard about it. And when we went back and visited the following year, we said to our friends, could this be true? And they said, oh, yes. And we said, where is it? And they said, well, it's just outside of town. And we went just outside of town, and there was a little monument that you could hardly see with an inscription on it. And we looked at each other and said, how in the world could we not have known of this? And it was obvious. It was clearly that our friends basically denied that it even existed. Denial is the most serious issue, I think, that we have. And the good senator who read that story from the Denver Post, the conclusion of that was that the genocide did not happen. One of the lawyers that worked for me, a civilian attorney in the 8th Infantry Division at Bad Kreuznach, was one of the judges at the Nuremberg war trials. And we had obviously a lot of conversations with him. But those conversations did not exist with any of our German friends. And to this day, they don't exist. So the thing that concerns me the most is denial. Denial that it ever happened. And if you read some of the German papers, like I still tend to do, there was basically a whole new generation of Germans, German young people, who basically deny that the Holocaust ever happened. So this second part of this resolution, I think, is the most pertinent, which says that we, the members of the General Assembly, declare that the people of Colorado should use these days to teach and remember the great injustices of the past, and to commit to preventing such political and moral atrocities in the future. Denial is the worst enemy we have in accomplishing that, and we all need to recommit ourselves each day to make sure that that doesn't occur.
Senator Sheffel.
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, as we all know, what a privilege it is to be able to serve in this place in a representative capacity and to rise in support of a resolution like this and without fear of reprisal or criticism to be able to get up and speak in favor of it. As I hear all of us, there's kind of a theme that develops. We all feel somehow inadequate. I remember talking last year and telling about an experience, and we somehow feel fear of repetition, that somehow if we're repeating things, that's maybe not good, and just generally inadequate to talk about such a profound event in history. I remember after last year, and echoing those words, someone contacted me from the community and said, no, don't you see, that's what it's all about. It's important that we do this. Repetition doesn't matter. It's important that we repeat, because that's part of the whole goal. That's the lest we forget. That's how we keep from repeating history. That's the importance of that. So I rise today in support of this, if nothing else, to say, once again, thank you to my parents. They're the ones that first taught me about this. I related and have related and will relate again. Many, many years ago now, they sent a pretty young kid, foolish, pretty ignorant. They sent him to Europe for the summer, said, have fun, learn a lot. There were a couple of non-negotiables, I call them, non-negotiables for that trip. One was to visit Dachau. And although I was young and pretty ignorant and stupid at 17, it had a profound effect on my life. You cannot escape those images, and they shape you. The other one was a reading list. All good parents have a summer reading list. I had mine as a kid. One of the non-negotiables on that was Corrie ten Boom's The Hiding Place. story of hiding Jewish people in a hiding place, and the profound story that goes with that. Those events shape you. I always talk about this, that we're the sum total of all the different things that make us who we are, and those are some of the things that have combined to make me me, and I'm sure you all can share in that. So I rise in support of this, and I rise to thank them. That was foresight. I didn't understand it at the time. It didn't make much sense to me at the time, but you sure get it later. So today, I have a 19-year-old who's been to Poland. There were some non-negotiables there, so she has seen the camps there, and we've had discussions about those. And I went in to say goodnight to my youngest the other night. She was in bed reading. And I did as all parents do, went and gave her a hug, gave her a kiss, and said, "What are you reading?" She looked up at me and said, "The Hiding Place, Daddy." We kind of both said the words at the same time. Required reading. And so it carries on, and so the statement that was made to me after I spoke last year really rings true. No, none of us are really worthy to come up and talk about this. It's okay that we feel woefully short and inadequate, and it's okay that there's some repetition here. That's the whole point. And so it's important that we do it this year, and it's important that we would do it next year, and last year. And all of our times will come to an end here at some point, and these chairs will be filled with completely different people. And they need to continue this as well.
Senator Rivera.
Thank you, Madam President. The only thing stronger than man's ability to do evil is the man's capacity to forgive. But let us never, never forget.
Minority Leader Cadman.
Thank you, Madam President. Majority Leader touched on something that I had highlighted in the resolution myself, and I know we visit this and revisit this, but as my colleague from Douglas County said, that's okay. I'm glad the children left that were up in the gallery. As was mentioned by the senator from Alamosa, we were on the same trip together, a sponsor, and mentioned going through the museum. You have a shed this in December. I mean, really days ago, and mentioned the children's museum specifically dedicated to the estimated 1.5 million children lost in the Holocaust. Lost. They weren't lost. They were killed. They were killed. And as you're walking through this, the mirrors and the darkness are reflecting around you. You can't count the infinite images of the candles representing the lives of those children. And as you're walking through there, what you're hearing behind you are names, ages, birthplaces. And I will tell you, for someone that has children, when you hear the age and the name of someone that's the same age as yours, you stop a little longer. That was probably the hardest part of the trip. Senator Heath, to your point, use these days to teach and remember the great injustices of the past. As the Nobel laureate Elie Wiesel warned years ago, to forget a Holocaust is to kill twice. So imagine every image you've ever seen, repeating that someplace because we forgot it. Imagine that in your head. To kill twice. Turn those figures into 3 million children instead of 1.5. Who has inflicted this upon us? Who has made us Jews different from all other people? Who has allowed us to suffer so terribly up till now? It is God that has made us as we are, but it will be God too who will raise us up again. If we bear all this suffering, and if there are still Jews left, if that doesn't stop you, I don't know what does. If there are still Jews left. When it is over, then Jews, instead of being doomed, will be held up as an example. Who knows? It might even be our religion from which the world and all peoples learn good, and for that reason and that reason alone do we have to suffer now. We can never become just Netherlanders or just English or representatives of any country for that matter. We will always remain Jews, but we want to, too. Anne Frank. 14 years here, I've spoken on this for at least a decade, and I think I've mentioned to you a few times why, and it's just that reason. We have a duty to share so that this doesn't get repeated. Back to the Nobel laureate, Elie Wiesel, for the dead and the living, we must bear witness, and I feel it's my duty, since I've had the opportunity to go to Dachau, to go to Auschwitz, to go to Birkenau, and now to Yavashed, to make sure that anybody in the gallery or anybody watching the tape or anybody in here who has not had those opportunities understand what happened there. I think what was amazing to me was watching the number of people from cultures all around the world packed that museum so tight in December, it was actually uncomfortable to go floor after floor after floor after floor through the exhibits and listen to the stories, because you really couldn't get ahead of the group in front of you or around them. Groups from Asia, from Russia, all over Europe, America. You could hear the dialects and the languages and the interpreters, and everybody's walking around with those little recording, the listening devices. I would tell you, after being to all those other places, and to include, as I have mentioned before, being there at Auschwitz with 4 of the survivors of that camp, to include a Sonderkommando, Henry Mendelbaum, who, as you know, passed away a couple years ago. Seeing the number of people in Yavashed, am I saying that right? Really drove something home to me that I hadn't experienced before. And I hope it's coming true that nobody will ever forget what happened there, and that I don't understand how there could be one denier in the world, especially in the world we live in today with the technology that we have and the media and the communications and the information. For the dead and the living, we must bear witness. Our founding fathers had it right. Governments are instituted among men at the consent of the governed to protect the inalienable rights of its people. Governments are not supposed to kill their own people. Can you imagine a government actually plotting a plan called The Final Solution, which was actually the title? The Final Solution of the Jewish Problem, and then documented it, their government. The Rwandan genocide was mentioned here. I traveled in 2007 with a survivor of the Rwandan genocide, Immaculée Ibugalizia, who spent 73 days in a room probably not much bigger than this space with half a dozen other women hiding from men, standing outside the bathroom yelling. They knew she was in there, and they were there to get her. They already got her brother. They already got her father. They needed to take her out so they could get her land. 500,000 to 1 million people killed in 100 days. And they didn't have weapons of mass destruction. Most of those people were killed with machetes and knives and sticks. It's not about what's in the hand, it's about what's in the heart, isn't it? The weapon out here is irrelevant. The true weapon is in the soul. We can't legislate against that, but we can communicate what happens, and that's our responsibility. I want to thank my colleagues for bringing this. It is always an honor to participate in this day. I wish we didn't have to be here, but we should always be here.
Senator Crowder.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, what I'd like to do at this point is introduce you to a survivor. Paula Berger, born Paula Kaladice, was born July 27, 1934, in Novigradic, Poland, to Wolf and Sarah Kaladice. She had a brother Isaac, who was almost 7 years old when the war broke out. When the Nazis first invaded the town, Paula's family was taken into the ghetto at gunpoint. They took very little with them, and they were there for a year and a half before her father initiated her escape and survived with Belinsky partisan group, who rescued Jews from Nazi extermination until they were liberated by the Russian army in 1945. In 1949, Paula moved to Chicago after waiting 4.5 years at a deportation camp. She was married in 1951, divorced later, and moved to Colorado in 1967. She came to visit Boulder, and everything was so pretty, and the sky was so clear. She hadn't seen blue skies in so long, and Chicago was the only place she knew. It wasn't like Denver. She met Sam Booger in 1979 and married in 1981. She has 3 children, Susan, Frida, and Stephen. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Paula Berger.
Is there any further discussion? Senator Ulibarri.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, colleagues, for your comments this morning and for your observance of this resolution. I also wanted to extend a thanks to the folks who ensure that we continue the tradition that we've discussed this morning. People like the Anti-Defamation League, the Holocaust Awareness Institute, the Colorado Coalition for Genocide Awareness and Action, Jewish Community Relations Council, and the Holocaust survivors like Paula, who come here every year to ensure that we never forget. So thank you very much for being here today. It's tough to discuss this resolution. I've seen folks get emotional up here. I've been observing my colleagues. Thank you all for sharing your truth and for giving us your perspectives about this resolution. But I look around and I see these columns that go down into the earth right here on top of this hill. And I think about this hill. And I think about the people who were here before this Capitol stood. The Cherokee, the Cheyenne, the Dene, the Ute, those who were massacred here on this ground where these columns are rooted. And I think about our history of rebuilding from genocide and growing as a country, and the call and the promise I think that we've made as a country, which is never again. It was a promise that was made when tanks rolled into the concentration camps. We said never again. Never again would a civilized society ignore the cries of human suffering. Never again would we turn a blind eye to atrocities against humanity. And we paused after World War II and the Holocaust, and we asked ourselves 2 questions. First, what did we learn from the Holocaust? And the second is, how can we use that learning to ensure that we end hatred and that we make sure that atrocities like this never happen again? And unfortunately, never again has become yet again. I've heard my colleagues rise and talk about Rwanda. I've heard them talk about Bosnia. We can talk about the Congo and the killings, the 5 million folks who have been killed in the last 2 decades. We can talk about Sudan and what's happened there. We've heard a colleague talk about that. But just 2 years ago, with the conflict and killing in Syria. We see it happening again. And I pause here and I ask myself, how can we say never again, but very quickly see yet again happen? And it's scary to me that this happens. I think the term that was used by the good senator from Berthoud is consistently numb. And I ask, what is the force? What is the power? What is the phenomenon that causes genocide to occur? And I think of all of the examples I just listed, and I think about what happened here on this ground, on this hill. And I stand here in the center of this aisle, and I think I understand what the problem is. And I'm going to move over to this microphone. It's that in our human nature, we believe there is an us and them. We believe there are Christians and Jews, Arabs and Muslims, and somehow there is an us and them. And we care for us, but we don't really care for much for them. We divide ourselves into these groups. That's why I moved microphones, so I can be over here. Because there is just one truth. There is no really us and them. That's false. That is a myth. There is just us. Just us. Us in this room, us outside of this room, us as a human family. There is just us. And when extreme acts of violence happen against any one of us, it is against all of us. So, colleagues, I ask you that not only do we remember those who have been lost to the acts of tyrants and ethnic cleansing, we think long and hard about the idea of us. Let's remember our brothers and sisters who are suffering today. Let us strengthen our commitment to alleviate anguish and foster dignity for all human beings, so that someday in the very near future, never again will truly mean never again.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none. The motion before us, Senator Crowder, did you? I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
Madam Chair, I just move HJR 14-1015 forward and ask for a roll call vote.
Thank you, Senator Crowder. A roll call vote has been requested. We will do that, and while the roll is being called, the Senate chimes will ring out, and will ring out of respect for all those who've died, but especially those who died in the Holocaust. Mr. Majors, would you please call the roll?
Aguilar. Aguilar, aye. Balmer. Balmer, aye. Baumgartner. Baumgartner, aye. Brophy. Brophy, aye. Cadman. Cadman, aye. Carroll excused. Crowder. Crowder, aye. Grantham. Grantham, aye. Harvey. Harvey, aye. Heath. Heath, aye. Herpin. Herpin, aye. Hill. Hill, aye. Hodge. Hodge, aye. John. John, aye. Johnston. Johnston, aye. Jones. Jones, aye. Kafalis. Kafalis, aye. Kerr. Kerr, aye. King. King, aye. Lambert. Lambert, aye. Lundberg. Lundberg, aye. Marble. Marble, aye. Newell. Newell, aye. Nicholson. Nicholson, aye. Renfro. Renfro, aye. Rivera. Rivera, aye. Roberts. Roberts, aye. Scheffel. Scheffel, aye. Schwartz. Schwartz, aye. Stedman. Stedman, aye. Toktrop. Talkdrop, aye. Todd. Todd, aye. Ulibarri. Ulibarri, aye. Zenzinger. Zenzinger, aye. Madam President.
Aye.
Madam President, aye.
With a vote of 34 ayes and 1 excused, House Joint Resolution 1015 is passed. Senator Ulibarri.
Thank you, Madam President. I request that the current roll call be added as sponsors.
Seeing no objection, the current roll call will be added as co-sponsors. Members, we will stand in a brief recess to greet our guests. And I also wanted to comment that we had a senator here, I think she may be gone now, but former Senator Dorothy Rupert. I'm sorry, Representative Rupert was here for a while. Okay, we'll be in recess to greet our guests. The Senate will come back to order. Conference committees to report. Mr. Majors?
First report of the First Conference Committee on House Bill 1193. This report amends the re-revised bill. To the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives, your First Conference Committee appointed on House Bill 1193 concerning requirements governing the imposition of a fee for the research and retrieval of public records under the Colorado Open Records Act has met and reports that it has agreed upon the following: that the House accede to the Senate amendments made to the bill as the amendments appear in the re-revised bill with the following changes. Respectfully submitted, Representatives Salazar, Lebsog, and Gardner, and Senators Kafalis, Roberts, and Jones.
Message from the House.
April 7, 2014, Madam President, the House has passed on third reading and transmitted to the Revisor of Statutes House Bills 1013 as amended, 1061 as amended, 1072 as amended, 1170 as amended, 1199 as amended, 1203 as amended, 1173 as amended, 1270 as amended, 1283 as amended, 1009 as amended, 1029 as amended, 1278 as amended, 1316 as amended, 1213 as amended, 1095 as amended, 1016 as amended, 1266 as amended, 1011 as amended, 1014 as amended. The House has passed on third reading and returns herewith Senate Bill 114. The House has passed on third reading and transmitted the Revisor Statute Senate Bill 27 as amended. The House has voted to concur in Senate amendments to House Bill 1141 and has repassed the bill as so amended. The House has voted not to concur in Senate amendments to House Bill 1336 and requests that a conference committee be appointed. The Speaker has appointed Representatives Duran as chairman, May and Giroux as House conferees on the First Conference Committee on House Bill 1336. The House has granted authorization to go beyond the scope of the differences. The bill is transmitted herewith. The House has voted not to concur in Senate amendments to House Bill 1342 and requests that a conference committee be appointed. The Speaker has appointed Representatives Duran as chairman, May and Giroux as House conferees on the First Conference Committee of House Bill 1342. The House has granted authorization to go beyond the scope of the differences. The bill is transmitted herewith.
In response to a request from the House for a conference committee on House Bill 1336, the President appoints Senator Stedman as chair, Hodge and Lambert as Senate conferees on the First Conference Committee on House Bill 1336. Senator Stedman.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I move that the First Conference Committee for House Bill 1336 be granted the authority to go beyond the scope of differences between the two chambers.
Senator Stedman, did you want to give explanation?
It's the long bill.
Thank you. The motion before the body is to grant permission to the conferees on the First Conference Committee on House Bill 1336 to consider matters not at issue between the two houses. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and permission to go beyond the scope is granted. In response to a request from the House for a conference committee on House Bill 1342, the President appoints Senator Stedman, chair, Hodge and Lambert as Senate conferees on the First Conference Committee on House Bill 1342. Senator Stedman.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that the First Conference Committee for House Bill 1342 be granted the authority to go beyond the scope of differences between the two chambers. This, colleagues, is the Capital Construction Transfer Bill, and we had such a good time with it on Thursday last week. We made a bit of a mess, and we're probably going to have to do just some technical corrections, but want to make sure we get it right.
The motion before the body is to grant permission to the conferees on the First Conference Committee on House Bill 1342 to consider matters not at issue between the two houses. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and permission to go beyond the scope is granted. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam President. It was quite a morning, and I'm still a little super, I guess, sensitive to that whole conversation. It was something we needed to do, that's for sure. So, Madam President, I would move that the Senate adjourn till 9 a.m. Tuesday, April 8th.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the Senate will adjourn until 9 a.m. Tuesday, April 8th. Okay. Just a few hesitancy maybe.